Good morning, everybody. So, another Honest RC review coming at you. Here we go. Today, we will be looking at this. This is, on a quick glance, if you don't know exactly what you're looking at, looks like a Tamiya Bruiser, or maybe a Tamiya Mountaineer with Bruiser wheels and tires. Well, it's not. This is, in fact, the HGP407. Or the Hengguan, I probably butchered the pronunciation of that, P407. Or, for, other easier to use terminology, the Bruiser Clone. Now, HG Hengguan, again, I probably screwed that up, is a Chinese RC brand that makes kind of almost, I don't want to say knockoffs, because aside from the different materials that they use, they look pretty close to the original, like copies almost. That's why it's called a Bruiser Clone in most groups, because essentially it's just a slightly inferior, or depending on who you're talking to, a very inferior version of the original. Now, at a buying price, if you get this on eBay or Amazon, of around $350, it's, for a clone, that seems like it'd be a pretty high price to pay. But let's just, get into it and talk about some of the things I actually do like about this before I really start tearing into it. My assistant is here helping me once again because I'm in her chair, so she's not too happy about that. Now, for starters, one of my favorite things about this Bruiser Clone is the body. It is a hard plastic body. It comes with a nice detailed interior. It's fairly detailed. It's not, like, perfect. All the different light buckets inside the body shell allow for a lot of really good mounting positions for different lights. Like, you can have super small LEDs for the marking lights, the indicators, those lights down there, the headlights. I mean, even if you look along the back here, there's a spot. There is, in fact, a spot for marking lights in the back here. And then, of course, you've got your tail lights, your reverse light, and your upper indicator. So they do have spots pre-designated for all these different lights. Now, for mine, I don't have, I've got a decent light controller in here. Let me pull this body off so that way you can see. So with the body off here, you can see in the back there's 4 spots there, plus the indicator lights. So I've just got the rear tail lights and the indicators on the sides, and up front here I have the fog lights, headlights, and marking lights, along with the indicator lights active, hooked up to this little control board here. Other than that, there's quite a few mounting points for lights, so you can really get these things looking really scale with all the lights. And if you have one of the more expensive controllers that when you turn the wheel, the indicators flash like you're signaling your turn, which I find really cool. Another thing that I do like about this is I do love the forward mounting position for the engine, or for the motor rather. Now, it's gives it more scale look. Now, if this thing had an opening hood and didn't have this post here for mounting the body, you could put a scale engine, like a 3D printed engine cover, or something. I forget what company. I know RC 4-wheel drive makes a few of them that you just slide over the motor, and it looks like an actual scale engine. I love that about this truck. I love the whole setup, the chassis rails, the way it sits. The way everything looks pretty scale, and that's one of the big things that I really like about it, aside from this brace for mounting the body here. And now, with the good being said, it's time to start ripping into this thing. So, where to begin on this thing? Well, here we go. Starting with the suspension. So, I'm not used to leaf-sprung trucks. This is my first leaf-sprung truck, and it seems to work really good. However, unless I go through and tighten every single one of these screws for all 4 shocks, top and bottom, before every time I take this thing out, they all back off and I end up losing a screw. I've used thread locker, red Loctite, and the screws still back off somehow, some way. They always find a way to back off or just shake out as I'm driving it around, which is very annoying. Second big thing is, like, as you can see there, from the last time I drove it, it's missing one of the screws holding the rear shock on the passenger side. Second, everything underneath here. Just everything. I love the scale look of it all, but again, I had to use some red Loctite on all these screws here, and even then, at one point in time, they would back out. I don't know if it's just the quality of the screws that they used, they're just cheap, or, you know, the quality of the materials, it just wouldn't hold together. I had to use Loctite, and even then, you know, I double check them before every run because they would back out anyway. So as much as I love the scale chassis setup, as much as I love this, the motor that came with this thing originally sucked. Not only was it loud and very slow, but it didn't have a whole lot of power. Along with the ESC that came with this thing originally, I swapped out for a quick run 1080 because the original ESC, when you'd give it throttle, it was jittery and very unresponsive going into reverse. And when it would go into reverse, it was very lackluster. Like, it would what's the correct term I want to use? It can't bog down because it's electric, but when you would hit reverse, it would jump back ever so slightly and then just slowly crawl backwards like it was being forced to do something it could not do physically. It was just very, very anemic in its power delivery. So I swapped out the ESC with a quick run 1080 and it has been great ever since. I also took out the stock motor and replaced it with this generic Surpass Hobby 12-turn brushed motor. It's still loud, but it is much faster now, much better for, you know, trail driving and then, you know, doing some small jumps and just having a fun out in the trails or in the backyard. I may eventually go brushless in this one because now I think all but one of my trucks is brushless. All but two. All but two are brushless except for my nitros. So I've got this and the Big Bear that are still brushed. Everything else is running a brushless system. So I may upgrade this to a brushless system and I may lock the rear end. Another thing that I have a problem with. The rear end, it does not have a locked rear diff, so crawling is damn near impossible. That's why I only really use this as a trail truck or to screw around with in my backyard. Having the front diff open is fine. The rear, however, I would have liked to see it come locked. I believe you can get a locking piece to put in this to lock it up to make it a little bit more capable on the trails or in the woods or even up, like, you know, some easier paths, but once I figure that out and get one and I can test it, I'll have more on that. But right now it's just open diff, and as soon as one tire lifts, it starts spinning and this truck goes nowhere. Another thing, the steering servo is pretty good. The steering servo works very well. The steering system is extremely over-designed because the servo is way the hell back here. So all that linkage up front there's a bit of play. There's actually not as much play as you would think, because the linkage is all pretty tight. Yeah, it's moving the whole linkage, but so the steering is decently tight. However, the other servo that this came with, the servo for the 3-speed transmission, is not as effective. So this comes with a 3-speed transmission. It has 4 low, 2 low, and 2 high. So in 4 low, this thing just all-wheel drive. In 2 low, it doesn't like the servo for some reason doesn't like to click into gear completely. The truck has to be rolling in order for it to click into 2 low for some reason, and even then sometimes it pops out. Then you go into 2 high. 2 high works fairly well, but sometimes it'll pop out, so I may be swapping the servo out, the shift linkage servo. I maybe end up swapping that out to one that's a little bit more powerful, or one that maybe just isn't stock. Because that servo, it just seems rather weak. And the remote. The remote this thing came with is very just... It feels very cheap, very flimsy. It just feels like it's... If I hold it too tight, it'll fall apart. But it does the job. I mean, it's got this little selector switch, so 4 low, 2 high, on, off. The steering... That's not the trim, that's the steering rate. Oh no, that is the trim. The steering trim. Then you look up top here. It's got a bind button, and then it's got a steering rate and the throttle trim. I believe that... No, that says steering trim. Oh, so, okay, so they both say steering trim, but one of them's the throttle trim, that one's the steering rate, and one's the steering trim. And then it's got the steering and throttle reverses, and then it's got these little indicators. It's supposed to tell you what mode it is in, but these lights have never worked. The only lights that come on is those, so I don't know, like, if they just put those in there to kind of make it look like it's doing something, but I mean, unless this is just something that they use this remote for one of their other trucks, because it looks like, you know, it does have like a normal steering, 4-wheel steering, crab walk steering, and then just a rear steering option. But this remote does not have any other button to function as what would control that. So maybe it's just a thing that they use another version of this remote for, but either way, the remote is very flimsy. I may end up swapping that out with another one eventually as well. But I mean, you know, it works for now, so I may just run with it until it breaks. And so now back to the last thing, the switch, on-off switch here being at the top of, you know, the top of that little sealed case. Convenient, yes, but not very good if you want to put like scale objects in the back here. I mean, I've got a scale gas can back here, but having that here just kind of, you know, you can't really put anything on top of it without fear of it, you know, knocking it in the off position while you're driving. But I mean, you know, it is what it is. So I mean, overall, is this a cool truck? Yes, it is. I mean, I've loved the Tamiya Bruiser ever since I first saw one. But some of the prices for original Bruisers right now, people are asking, you know, upwards of $700, $800, you know, $900 for a vintage Bruiser, and that's one that, you know, could be missing the wheels and tires. The tires could be all dry rotted and have all these different like flat spots in them, or, you know, the bumpers may be broken, maybe missing a body, but everything else is there. You know, people are asking stupid money for original Bruisers, right now. So, I mean, it's for the price that you pay for one of these brand new as a ready to run. If you want a Bruiser, even if it's just a Bruiser clone bad enough, is it worth it? I would say yes, just because now at least, you know, hey, it's a clone, but it's a Bruiser and it's still pretty badass. I mean, it still looks awesome, even though it has a assload of flaws that I just pointed out. For a rating, however, for the price, it is fairly easy to work on, as you know, from what I've torn into it so far. But for the price, I'm gonna have to give it a 4 out of 10. I'm sorry, anybody who, you know, may feel otherwise, but there's just so much wrong that they offer with this. From the remote, the servo for the transmission, the original motor being just absolute garbage, the ESC being garbage, just the lackluster quality and some of the materials that they used, that, you know, the screws just being so cheap. And I mean, if you have the time and you're going to completely go through it, sure, go through and replace all the hardware with better quality hardware, so that way it's, you know, at least stable and solid and held together nicely. Or if you're just missing a couple of pieces for your original, you know, you can buy these pieces, all these pieces now, because the clones are out there and they're readily available. So if you have an original and you need a bumper to like finish it, or, you know, your original bumpers are broken and you just want to replace them so you can run it, or have a shelf queen again. No shelf queens. But I mean, if you need bumpers, now you can find them. If you need a replacement body, the body is damn near perfect. I mean, the parts are out there now. As a whole, the truck, it only gets a 4 out of 10. I'm sorry, guys. I can't. I can't rate it any higher. As cool as I think this thing is, it's got just so many flaws that I can't really give it a higher rating than that. And I mean, it sucks because I had real high hopes for this thing. It's still cool. It's gonna stay in my collection. I've even got a ESS1 sound system back here, and this thing, you know, when it starts up, it sounds like the supposedly like the Castrol Tom Supra, you know. So I mean, it's got a Toyota engine sound. It sounds great. It's fun to run, but it's just tedious. So do with that information what you will, guys. So as you know, I say at the end of all my videos, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you like this kind of content, feel free to like and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell to be notified about all my newest videos. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on any of the social medias that are linked down below in the description, or feel free to comment here. Stay tuned for more, and you know, have fun. Oh, you want to say something? No? Okay. All right. Have fun, everybody. Enjoy, and stay tuned for more.